Hey, what's up? It's Kit. Time for another video. Today we're going to be talking about fast and slow jigging reels. This is not brand specific, and your takeaway after this video is that you would better understand what they're used for and why. Perhaps it'll also give you a clear understanding so that when you go to the tackle shop to set up either a fast jigging or a slow jigging setup, you'd be able to identify and pick which reel you need. Now, there's a certain dynamic that actually happens between the rod, the reel, and the jig. So in order for you to understand why you need this type of reel and that type of reel, we have to talk about the differences and the similarities of slow and fast jigs. Fast jigs and slow jigs. They are heavy. Some of them are quite heavy, some of them are quite light. They're both designed to be dropped down. With a fast jig, there are certain ways to actually impart action on the jig, and there's only one thing that you actually have to realize. The fish only bites the fast jig when it's in the horizontal position. Okay, so the time when the jig is actually at the in a horizontal position, or if it's rocking like that, that's the time when the fish bites it. It's not like when it's like that. Okay, sometimes you'll catch a fish with the whole jig inside the mouth. Okay, quite rare, but most times you'll catch the fish only in the horizontal position. Now, when the Japanese actually found out that the fish only bite it in the horizontal position, they invented the slow jig, because hey, what if you had a jig that is horizontal majority of the time? And slow jigging was invented. So that's basically the relationship between the two. But there's something that you need to realize. Okay, as far as fast jig and slow jigging are concerned, they're basically kind of the same, only they're going in different directions. So the action of a fast jig is going up. So it's moving, going up, because on the way down, it just goes straight and there's no action. Whereas with the slow jig, it goes down, flutters, okay? And for you to actually impart action, it's either you have to pull, it goes up, and then it gets slack, and then it has its action. So its action is mainly when it's going down. So if you think about those two things, with how a fast jig moves and how a slow jig moves, you immediately can see that there's kind of a different approach to each. Okay, so with a fast jig, you need a slow retrieve reel. And for Shimano's, it's the PG version. Okay, so these are slow retrieve reels, because what you want or what you need is actually a reel that would give the lure or the jig its action, but not pull it up really fast. Now, this equates to having your jig stay in the strike zone longer, whereas with the slow jig, it's already in the strike zone most of the time. If you want, you can let it stay in the strike zone for as long as possible, or as long as you want it, really. All you have to do is just give it more line and then jig it back up. And that's the advantage of the slow jig. It would be able to stay in the strike zone with the desired action for as long as it takes. Whereas with the fast jig, it actually moves up, and that's the only way it'll get action. So you have to open your bail, drop it down, or flick the gear and drop it down again and start the process. Whereas with the slow jig, you're continually and always there. Now, with the fast jig, as mentioned, you want it to stay in the strike zone for as long as possible, so you need a reel that retrieves the line slower. Whereas with the slow jig, you want a reel that's fast so that it can pick up slack and you're always in contact with the jig. Now remember, you're already always in contact with the jig with a fast jig because you're retrieving it with with the jigging motion. What the slow jig also needs is that the reel is fast enough to be able to reel in all the slack and the stretch of the line. Now we'll talk more about the line in a later video, but in a nutshell, that's basically why you need a slow reel for your fast jigging and a fast reel for your slow jigging. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but there is really a reason for all that. I have a spinning setup and I have a narrow spool conventional reel. Now when I'm fast jigging, when I use spinning reels, I usually reel with the left, okay? But the reason why I have a conventional that reels with the right is that when I get tired of this, I could just switch to the other hand, okay, and go on with my jigging. So that's one very good reason. The other is that for long jigs such as these, the spinning rod actually gives it a slight pause on the retrieve, and that gives it more time in the horizontal position for long jigs specifically. But for shorter jigs, I use the conventional, okay? And since it's a direct contact with the spool, you would be able to pull easier with the conventional than with the spinning setup, at least for me, okay? Most important for me is actually the length of the handles. So in particular, you can move the handle shorter or longer. I set it at long, but it's still not as long as my slow jigging setups, which I'll explain later on. Okay, so that's my fast jigging setups. Now for slow jigging setups, I use an Osha Jigger 1500. This is 90% of my use right here. Okay, it's a fast retrieve reel. As mentioned earlier, the more you drop deeper, the more you need to retrieve line, because the stretch, there's longer stretch or there's more stretch, and also because your line actually forms a D. And when that D forms, remember you're dealing with a drifting boat and current. So when that D forms, you want a really fast reel to reel up all this stretch and all that slack so that you'd always be in contact with your jig. So I have a longer handle to give me better control and leverage, okay? You don't have to do that, but I've noticed that with a longer handle, I actually get more control. When it's really short, it's good when you're reeling in fast, but when you're dropping down in deeper water, you want that extra bit of control and easier to reel. When you have a fish on, it also helps you a lot because it gives you, like I said, a bit more leverage. So it works better for me. You don't have to go out there and buy a handle. These things are actually kind of expensive, but if you can, and as soon as you put it on, you'll feel the difference. It's just a world apart. Especially on my slow jigging reels, I actually put the longest handle I could find. This is a Studio Ocean Mark, and yeah, it works great. So you'll also notice that for my slow jigging reels, I have wide spooled reels. I don't have, and both conventional. A lot of people actually kind of have a problem when they first switch over to slow jigging or use slow jigs with their setups, and they immediately notice that on spinning rods and reels, it takes forever to drop down. Now the reason for this is because slow jigs, as I've mentioned earlier, are designed to go horizontal as soon as you give it slack. Now with a conventional reel, you can thumb the spool, and when you thumb the spool lightly, what happens is the jig actually goes vertical and drops down. You can't do that with a spinning reel. So when you're fishing in deep water, it's very difficult to control the jig's drop because it needs that, okay? Some people actually hold the line, but you can't be as consistent as either thumbing the spool like that lightly or putting your index finger front like this. It's just easier with conventional gear. Now you'll also notice that on my big one right here, I'm not using an Oshia Jigger 2000. This is an Oshia Jigger 2000 and this is a Trinidad 16. The reason being is that on a narrow reel, when you're dropping down, the stack of line, or what's called an arbor, is actually smaller than on a wider spool reel. Now, the reason why you want a lot more line and why you want a wider spool reel is because of that slack I was telling you about earlier. So the more line you have, the more you actually get back on. You'll notice this on a full spool. When you reel, it's actually what's indicated on the box. So like on a full spool, if it says that it reels in 40 inches, or let's say in centimeters, it could be, let's say some reels actually go up to 53. And when you reel, one revolution will give you 53 centimeters. But on a half spool, if you measure it, it's not going to give you 53 centimeters. It's less, probably 30. On an Ocean Jigger 2000, which has a narrow spool, at half, it's going to reel in way less line than a Trinidad would. Of course, it doesn't have the automatic engage, but it is stronger. Okay, and the gear ratio is about the same. But what it does give me is that it gives me the power to actually get all that slack off and then really move my jig. Now, a lot of people don't realize that when you're dropping, that 2% stretch, or let's say 3 or 4%, equates to a lot. So if you're dropping down to 100 meters, 4% is already 4 meters. So imagine for you to move your jig, for you to move 30 centimeters, okay? You have to reel in all that slack with your reel together with your rod to be able to move the jig. You have to reel in 4 meters. That's at just 100 meters. So imagine if you're fishing deeper, that number goes up. So you're gonna have to reel in as much slack and stretch on the line before you actually get to move. I hope this information is useful to you. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. Like I mentioned, this is going to be part of a series, so once I release the next few ones, I'm going to put them all in one playlist, so check that out. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.